everybody, and welcome back. So the last couple videos, what we talked about here is once you're in your content folder, how to add content for it for students. And I talked first about how to do an item, that's this thing right here, how to set up files and upload those, how to create an assignment, and how to create a discussion forum. So now I'm going to talk about how to create a test. We're going to go to assessments, go to test. The nice thing about the tests, I think, is that there are a lot of options here for you depending on whatever test you want to create. So you're going to click create a new test. And first up, we're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this test 1. And let's say I give it a short little description for my students. Nothing too major, but again, one sentence about what it is and one sentence about when it will be due. This is a test on chapters 10 to 12. You will have, let's say you're going to give them 2 hours to complete the exam. You will have 2 hours to complete the exam. It will be due on April 4th by 11:59 p.m. Okay, everything in this folder is due April 4th at 11:59. So a couple things just about basic test design when you're doing distance learning. Number one, you can set the amount of time that they have to complete the exam if you want it to be timed. Just know that the ADA accommodations should still be able to be used for students who have accommodations. I don't know at this point, obviously, none of us do, what that might look like if they have testing in the testing center, or if you might have to change this test to allow them more time so that they have, double time or whatever the case may be. But for right now, we're just going to give it a short description. And I don't put also instructions. I find that gets a little bit confusing. So I'm just going to click submit. And now it's going to take me into building the actual test. So the other thing that I want to say about tests in a distance learning or online format, for me, it's kind of important to create questions that require some type of critical thinking. So a lot of people are opposed to online tests because they say, well, students can just look up the information. And that's true if you have something like, a basic fact, like what is a mitochondria in a cell, or what is a nucleus, or something like that. Or for literature, in this story, what's the name of the main character's brother, right? If you have a question like that, then yes, they can look it up easily online while they're taking the test. And then your test isn't really going to measure what you want it to measure. So instead of saying who's the main character's brother, for example, I might ask a question like, which of the characters in the story is the antagonist? Right? That's something that they might actually have to consider. Or I might have them have an essay question where they have to write a little bit more. So there's a lot of different options here, but I typically use the same 2 or 3. So the first one is an essay, and I'll show you guys what all of these look like. The first one is an essay. The second one is multiple choice. And then they also have a true, false, or a short answer. If you just, you can stick to just those 4, and that can be your test. If you have a multiple choice test, it's pretty easy to convert it to online. It might take a little bit of time to type everything in, but it isn't really that difficult. So let's look at what the essay questions look like. So I clicked essay. Okay, so here's my question title. My question title will be, let's say, summarize the main ideas. This is on chapters 10 through 12, right? So let's say I want them to summarize the main ideas of chapter 11. Say that's the title. And then I have the prompt. Describe the author's main ideas in chapter 11 of your text. Write 1 to 2 paragraphs, which is, 100 to 200 words. Be sure to include whatever you want to include here, key terms and concepts. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I just want to show you guys how to do this. So in the answer for an essay, I don't always have like an example of a correct response. If you want to have, something like, chapter 11 covered A, B, and C, you needed, or, and then kind of explain A was blah, 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 B was about blah, 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 C, and so forth. So you can have an example answer in there for them. After they submit their essay, they can see an example of a correct response. If you want for an essay, you can have a rubric. Again, if I have time today, I will try to go in and show you guys how to create one of those. And that's it. So I'm going to submit. It's just going to take a second. So now I have my essay question. When it comes up at the top, you can see here the number of points. Okay. So the default is 10. Let's say that I want to change the number of points there. Let's say I want for an essay, since it's a little bit longer, 20. Let's say I want 20 points for that. Okay, so now that is set at 20 points. So I have an essay question, and they have room when they go to do the test. They'll have room to type their answer. My next thing that I'm going to do is multiple choice. So I'm going to click multiple choice. There are some really nice options with multiple choice questions. So I'm going to have my question title. Question 1. And then my question, not my options. My options are going to be here. 1, 2, 3, 4, however many options you want. So let's say my question is, who was the antagonist in the story told in chapter 12? It's a dumb question, but it's a question nonetheless. So that is the question. Now I'm going to have my possible answers. Now, you have the option here of numbering the answers if you want, 1, 2, and 3, or A, B, and C. I always number them because I feel like when the students look at the test, there we go. When the students look at the test, it's difficult for them to sometimes see the answers. So I would number them either A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3, however you want. I also click to show the answers in random order. The reason for this is that the default correct answer is always number 1. It's really easy to put the correct answer here and then, your other 3 answers, 3 or 4, down in the other spaces. My recommendation for doing a multiple choice test, especially online, is, as I just said, to make sure that you number them. And the second thing is to always have the same number of answers. It is quite confusing if you switch from 4 to 5, or if you switch from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2, it's going to be confusing. So I typically do just the standard A, B, C, D, and I keep the answers numbered. I show them in random order so that I don't have to keep switching which one is correct, but also so that if students are taking the test and they're maybe in the same room or the same computer classroom, they don't have the same questions in the same order or the same answers in the same order. So that can be quite helpful. So my answer number 1, let's say that the actual antagonist is Bill. And then I have answer 2, Nancy. Answer 3, I guess if we go with this theme, Oliver. And answer 4, I'm gonna probably spell this wrong, so I'll say, if I was gonna say Fagin, but I'll say Frank. Okay, so now I have my 4 answers. You can give feedback for the correct response if you want. So I could say just something like, good choice. Bill is the enemy of the protagonist. I don't usually give feedback on here for correct responses. For incorrect, I sometimes do, just so that they know. So you can have that in there if you want for the correct response. You could also say for the incorrect something like, this was not correct. Bill is actually the antagonist. Okay, now you can do submit like I did with the essay, or you can submit and create another, and that's what I'm going to do, just to kind of show you guys how that works. So it's saving my first set, and now I'm going to create another. So this is going to be question 2. And for question 2, let's say I ask something like, whoops, let me type in the correct box here. Sorry. What are the key components to professional writing? Let's say that was a question that was asked in a chapter of your textbook. Then if they look that up, they're going to find a lot of components to professional writing, right? So maybe I want to rename that. According to chapter 11, what are the key components to professional writing? There we go. So now it's specific to their book. And then again, show answers in random order. Answer numbering A through B and C so that they have that consistency. And then here, let's say that the author said the professionalism, audience, tone, and formatting. Let's say that that's the correct answer. Answer 2 is going to be something stupid. Or let's say grammar and vocabulary. Answer 3, maybe I mixed this up a little bit. Whoops. Vocabulary, grammar, and tone. And then let's say I give a throwaway for answer 4. Having a cool idea. Okay, now instead of creating another one, I'm not going to give feedback for this one. I'm just going to hit submit. When I hit submit, my questions that I've created so far will come up. So here's my essay, right, worth 10 points. And then my multiple choice are worth 20. Sorry, the essay is worth 20. The 2 multiple choices are worth 10. I'm going to click the boxes for those. And then I'm going to change the points to 1. And then I'm going to update it. So that's the second way that you can change the number of points. You can either change it over here by just updating it one at a time, or let's try that again. There we go. Updating it one at a time, or if you have a number of things that you want to change the points, you can click those boxes by the things, right by the number, and then change the number of points total by up here, and then you click update. The other thing up here to notice is that it tells you how many questions you have in total and how many points it is total. So if you're looking for a specific number of questions, it's a nice way to keep track. And if you are trying to make sure that you have a total number of points, like 25 or 30 or 50 or 100, it's a nice way to keep track of that up there too. So now I'm going to create another question. I've done an essay. I've done some multiple choices. Now I'm going to do a short answer. I'm going to show you guys the short answer, and then we'll look at 2 more, and then that'll be it. So this is question 3. And something that they, you want them to write a couple sentences here. It's set up a little bit different from an essay where they can write almost as much as they want. Question 3, let's say paraphrase the author's thesis from chapter 10. Again, something that they cannot just look up online. They might have their book in front of them, and you can treat this like an open book test. Even if in normal circumstances you would not have an open book test, you can rewrite it so that it can be an open book test. But I'm not probably going to find out, if I'm taking a history class, I don't necessarily know what the author's thesis for chapter 10 is, right? And it probably won't be on Google. So that's a good question. And paraphrasing it, you might want to even explain, write in your own words, just so that they know what paraphrase is. The author's thesis from chapter 10. Then down here, you can give them a number of rows. That means how big their box is going to be. So if the author's thesis from chapter 10, let's say that you are looking at something on the Civil War, and the thesis is basically many people say that the Civil War was a states' rights issue, but this author does not agree with that. Okay, then that could be said in a couple sentences. So I'm going to give them 2 rows. But you'll notice it only goes up to 6 because it's not supposed to be an essay where it's very, very long. So I'm going to give them 2 rows for that. And then that is pretty much it. And I click submit. Now, you'll notice that I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. Blackboard has many things that you do not need. So the idea that you have to have all of those things, you don't have to have feedback every time. You don't have to have some of the other options that are there for aligning it to outcomes or creating more content or having an attachment. You don't need all of that stuff. Just the basic question and then the room for the answer. And you can kind of see here, right? Small space for them to be able to write in. So now we have an essay, we have a multiple choice, a couple multiple choices. This one is worth 10 points. I would probably leave it at that. The multiple choices are worth 1. The essay itself is worth 20. Then I'm going to create, let's see, true, false. There's an either or option on here too, which I don't know why they do that because it's basically the same. Well, almost the same. So here's question, what are we up to now? 4. So true or false. The author claims that grammar is not important. Okay, I'm going to hope that the answer to that is a false one. And that's it. You put in your question title, you pick whether it's going to be true or whether it's going to be false. And again, you don't necessarily need the feedback. You don't need categories. You definitely don't need levels of difficulty. You don't need keywords. If you create many tests, those are some tools to help you categorize them. But for our purposes, you probably won't be. And the true false came in at 10 points. So I'm going to reset that to just be 1 point. And I'm going to submit. You'll notice too that it gives you the option for extra credit, which I think is really nice. So you can have an extra credit question on there if you normally give that to students. So now I have 5 questions: essay, multiple choice, short answer, true, false. And those are basically the ones that I use. But there's other options here too. If you do an either or, if you do a fill in the blank, that's there. I don't quite know what the hotspot is. I'm not sure about that. An opinion scale, that really would be more appropriate for a survey, not necessarily a test. And then you can also have multiple answer, which is basically like multiple choice. I'll click on that just to show you guys what that looks like. This is basically like multiple choice, but they can pick more than one, right? So if I have here question 5, who, oh, my mouse, sorry guys, who were the characters in this story? I realize that my questions here make no sense when put all together in a test, but I just want something to show you how this works. So answer numbering, same thing, keep it consistent. Show in random order. Number of answers, I'm keeping it 4, same as my multiple choice. Now you can see here, you're clicking which ones are correct. So let's say answers A and B are both correct, and then answers C and D are not. You might want to put that in your question. Who are the characters in this story? You may choose multiple answers. just so that they know. And then I'm going to go with down here, let's say Wendy, let's say Tasha, and let's say C is also correct, and that is Jamal. And let's say that D, Opal, is not one of the people who was in the story. You can do also something like, A and B, B and C, that kind of thing. Whatever you want to do there. And then you're skipping the rest of the stuff and just clicking submit. Okay. And I have now a test with 43, so I think that is a little bit weird. So I'm going to show you again, clicking all of the things, the multiple choice questions, and the true false, and the multiple answer. And I'm going to set all of them at 5 points. It's the other way we do it. And we update it. And when that updates, our new score, it's 6 questions, it's worth 50 points. That's a score that makes sense. And that is basically it. So I'm going to click OK now that my test is complete. And similar to a discussion board, I have to do this twice because a test is going to be hidden from students until you give them the front door access, meaning until you let them see it on their page. So I click submit. And I'm going to put the same description is already in there for you. You can see all of the questions. And now we have you cannot see the questions, but what you can see are the options. So I want to show the description to my students before they begin the test so that they know how long they have, right? I'm going to make it available to students. You can add an announcement or not. If you want to open it up and add an announcement, you can. I usually don't because they see it. And then you can decide if you want to let them have multiple attempts. So for different classes, I do allow this because I'm looking for them to achieve mastery, not just get it right the first time. So for example, I'm going to be setting up tests for my developmental reading and writing class. That class for grammar, I want them to have unlimited attempts. I want them to learn grammar and take the test as many times as needed, right? Just as an example. For another class, when I've given this for American literature, I want them to answer things about the book that they read or the story that they read or the poems that they're examining. So in that case, I probably would not allow unlimited attempts. So here, let's just leave that blank. They can just take the test one time. Then I do not recommend doing forced completion unless you have already had an online class or you've given your students tests on Blackboard before. If you're using this for the first time with the migration, they might not have 2 hours to sit and go through the test all in one sitting. So I don't recommend that you do that option. You can, though, set the timer. And if you give them, as I did with this one, 120 minutes, they have 2 hours to complete. If they stop, when they come back, the timer will pick back up. And then you have this option to auto submit or not. If you have auto submit, again, it's not really the nicest option for them, but if you feel like you really want them to only have exactly 2 hours, then click the auto submit button. When the time is up, it will automatically end the test and submit it. If it's off, then at the end of the test, the user can click submit when they're ready. It's up to you. I mean, I don't give tests normally online that much to begin with, except when we have assessments where we're giving tests, right? But for the most part, for my classes, I don't give tests. But if you have a class where you're giving them, I think being as kind to the students as you can, given the circumstances right now, that's just my recommendation. So that is pretty much it. Then we come down, again, lots of options that you don't need. You don't need the display. You don't need to have them have a password to access the test. You don't need to add users. It'll be there for people. And then the due date. So again, for this class, I think I set everything for this unit at April 4th, 11:59. And you have the option to not allow students to start the test if the due date is passed. So if you want a firm deadline, you can click that box. And then you can also have an option for giving them feedback. So if you put feedback into the test, meaning you said, here's the right answer, or you want them to show all of the answers and the correct ones, you can do that just so that they know. Now, if you have it set at unlimited attempts, then don't click those boxes, because the idea would be, that they can just look and see what the answers are. And then you have some test presentation. This means how the students are going to be able to see the test. You can give it to them all at once so that all of those questions I just created would be on the screen, or you can give them one question at a time. I typically leave it all at once because then they can see what's coming up and they can plan their time. If you give it to them one question at a time, and they think that they have, 2 hours to complete 50 multiple choice questions, when in fact, at the end of those 50 questions, you have an essay that might take them a half hour to do, that's going to be a problem, right? So I let them see the whole test all at once. I do, though, randomize the questions so that if you have them one at a time and students are in a room taking it together, they're going to get a different test than their partner. But that's always going to be an issue. And then I'm going to click submit. So just to go through that one more time, the description is the same by default from what you put in before. You're going to show the description before the test and make it available to students. You can allow more than one attempt if you want. If you want multiple attempts and allow unlimited, you can. So I clicked that box. I set my timer because I told them that they have 2 hours to complete. I set my due date. Display until doesn't really apply. So down here I have my due date, April 4th, 11:59. I have it automatically to go into my grade book. I have them see the answers when they're done. I'm showing it all at once, and I decided to randomize the questions. So once I've double checked all that, I'm going to click submit. And then we're back in our folder, and you can see there's my item, there are my 2 files, there's my assignment, there's my discussion board, and there's my test. The short description is there, and when they click into it, they will see what the test actually looks like. Now, I want to say I would never have an assignment, a discussion forum, and a test due all on the same day. But I just wanted to show you how this would look and what it would look like in your folder. So that's pretty much it. We've talked about building content, items, and files. We've talked about having assessments, assignments, and tests. And we've talked about tools, putting up a discussion board. I'm going to, in the next video, show you guys how to do an announcement. And then I will be creating another one to show you how to make a rubric. I hope this helped. Thanks.